Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And real quick, wanted to make this video because one of the most frequently asked questions that I get typically over on Instagram is somebody will message me and typically say they're in the market for either an M3 or an M2. And since I actually own both vehicles now, what my thoughts and opinions are on which is the better car. So I wanted to make this video and kind of compare and contrast the pros and cons of the M3 and the pros and the cons of the M2, and ultimately give you 3 reasons why I think that the M2 is the better bang for the buck in terms of which car that you should pick, or maybe some things to think about. Now, this is obviously going to be very dictated on my opinion of driving both these cars. I've had them both for some time now. Obviously, we've had the M2 for just a couple months, the M3 a little bit longer now, but I think that I have a pretty good understanding of what each car brings to the table and some takeaways. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so let's start by going ahead and talking about the M3 here. Now, like I said in the beginning, a lot of this stuff is gonna be opinion stuff, and a lot of this stuff may even change based on your personal scenario, right? Like if you're somebody who has a family, who has kids and needs to fit kids in the back seat of their car, then obviously the 4-door M3 is going to be the more practical car for you. Now, some quick pros and cons on the M3 here. Obviously, like we just pointed out, we definitely have more space in the M3 here. You have more options in terms of the actual color of the car, right? So this is the frozen Portimao blue. So you can get this color, you can get a bunch of different individual colors. And then furthermore, we have the orange interior, and these are all stuff that is not available on the M2 quite yet. Now, those things might be changing in the future, but it's important to note that as of recording the video right now, that is not something that you can get on the M2. So that's definitely a pro for the M3 here. So another big benefit to the M3 here, or another pro, is the fact that you can get this car in all-wheel drive or X-Drive. And driving, if you've never driven an X-Drive M3 comp, it is insane because with launch control, this thing just hooks. There's never been an issue where the car has lost traction or anything like that. So that's definitely something that I love in this car, but I desperately miss it in the M2 because you can't get the M2 in an X-Drive, at least yet. So finally, I think the last pro for the M3, or at least the things that really stick out to me, is the modability of this car. There's so many different aftermarket companies providing tons of different mods for this car as it sits right now. I know that with the M2, it's just kind of on the horizon, like companies are still just starting to push stuff out. But if you buy an X-Drive M3 or just an M3 in general, then you have a pretty good run-of-the-mill or a bunch of different options to choose from as far as aftermarket parts go. All right, getting into some of the cons for the M3 here. Now, these are some things that are super important to me, and if you put this into perspective, it definitely could impact the way that you choose, right? So MSRP on a base M3 competition X-Drive is $84,300. The base M2 price is $62,200. So you're looking at a price difference of almost $22,000 between each car at their base benchmarks, right? That's a huge gap. And we'll get into a little bit more on that in a second, but I did want to mention how big the price gap is between the two cars. The other thing I would say is kind of a downside is it's not, in my opinion, it's not as unique as the M2, whereas with the M2, we're getting some pretty new, aggressive kind of styling. And I think that while a lot of people thought negatively about it in the beginning when the car was first brought out, I think that a lot of those opinions are starting to switch, just like it did on the G80 when it first came out, right? And everybody was obsessing over the front grille and everybody thought it was so ugly until you started to see cars where they've changed the front end a little bit and made it look a lot better. I definitely think that same kind of opinion holds true on the new M2 as well. And then also too, this car is heavy, right? 3,800 pounds, maybe a little bit heavier than 3,800 pounds, but it's heavy. And in this car, since it's 4 doors, you can really feel it. So those are really the cons that I have on the M2. Overall, it's a beautiful car. I love it. But it's very much a different car than the M2. Getting into the pros and cons of this beautiful M2 here, and let's start off with the pros. Now, one thing I've already mentioned in previous videos is the fact that this car has a much shorter wheelbase, which affects the handling and allows this car to handle better than the M3 does. So right off the bat, that is going to be my first one. Again, the second one is it is $22,000 cheaper. Now, obviously, if you get in and you spec these appropriately or you spec them to your liking, that is going to impact the cost of the car. However, base pricing is $62,200 for this M2. And you know, to kind of piggyback off of that, you're getting the same motor, you're getting literally the same kind of interior, you get the widescreen, but you're not getting some of like the added tech that you can get in like the M3, where you can get the driver assistance package in the M3. You can't get that here. I don't have a 3D camera in here, and that's something that I wish I had, but it is, it's just one of those smaller things, right? And I know that I mentioned the weight of the M3, but this car is no slouch either, so it is pretty heavy too. Between 3,700 and 3,800 pounds. When we compare this car, it has 4 doors and it's an xDrive. So that's something to take into account. But this car, you don't feel like it's heavy, if that makes sense. It just feels small, it feels light, it feels nimble and agile in corners. Whenever I'm driving this, it doesn't feel like it's 3,800 pounds, which is crazy to me. All right, so getting into some of the cons on the M2 here, and really there's like 3 main ones that I feel are important to mention. But obviously the first one is going to be that you can only get this car in a rear wheel drive version. And I think that BMW kind of knew what they were doing, because if they offered this car right out of the gate, just an M2, no competition, no CS or anything like that with an xDrive, people wouldn't be buying the M4s or the M3s anymore. So it just made sense. I get it from a business standpoint that they didn't put xDrive on this car, at least right away. I do hope that they come out with an xDrive version of the car, whether it's a competition or a CS version, and who knows, but that would be very, very cool to see. The second thing, and I mentioned this on the M3, is that with the M2 here, you don't have a bunch of options for color, different color interiors and things like that we've all kind of know and grown to love on the M3 and M4s. We don't get that yet, at least on the M2. And I think that there's rumors of new colors coming and things like that, but as it sits right now, you only have a handful of options to choose from as far as paint colors go, and maybe like 3 options to choose from in terms of interior color. And then finally, the last one, like I mentioned, you don't have access to all the tech kind of gadgets that you can get over on the M3 here. So that could be something that sways your opinion too. Let's go ahead and jump into my top 3 reasons why I think that the M2 is the obvious winner between both of these cars. So based on your particular circumstances, I think really the only reason to go ahead and spring for the M3 is if you require the more space. But let's get into my first reason on why I think the M2 is the better buy. And that is going to be the price difference, right? $22,000 price difference between both of these cars, and you're literally getting the exact same thing for the most part, right? Granted, this car doesn't have xDrive and it doesn't have a couple of the like tech features that I would like. However, there's no way I could be able to justify an extra 20 grand for those specific set of features when, you know, the base, just the M3 versus the competition xDrive isn't even that big of a gap, right? So in my opinion, I cannot justify the additional $20,000 plus markup from the M2 to the M3. Reason number 2, and when I bought this car, it comes with about 450 horsepower and it's quick. By no means is it the 503 on the competition xDrive M3. And like I said, since this is an xDrive car, it just puts the power down like crazy. There's never been an issue with traction. For only $3,000, I was able to unlock the ECU. I was able to tune the car, put a downpipe on it, and make 555 wheel horsepower, right? So this car is now faster than the M3. And if that's something that concerns you, right, that this car is just a little bit more neutered or detuned than the M3, then that's an option you could do. I also understand that it's not for everybody, but with a couple of bolt-ons and even a JB4, you could be making decent power to equate to what you would be getting on the M3 competition xDrive. And finally, number 3, I think, and this is again my just personal opinion, I think that the M2 is a better car than the M3 for what I need it for, right? I enjoy driving it more. I enjoy the way it looks more. I enjoy the amount of attention that it gets because there's really no other car like it on the roads. I love the way that it handles. I love how nimble it is. And those are all things that I don't really get with the M3. At the end of the day, if I have to choose which set of keys I'm picking up for the day, I'm always picking, at least it seems, I'm always picking the M2 keys. And for that reason, I'm probably going to be looking at selling the M3 here because as it sits right now, the car just sits in the garage and it's hard to justify an extra car payment when I don't even drive the car, right? So I'll probably be looking to sell the M3. If you're interested, shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll leave links down below in the description. I hope this video provided you guys with sufficient information to make a better guess on which car or which direction that you want to go. In my opinion, like I said, I think the M2 is the better car, best bang for your buck. 62, I think I paid, the way that I spec'd this out was $72,000. This was 93, 94, I believe. So still that $20,000 gap, but I'm really enjoying the M2. I'm really enjoying working on it, modding it, and kind of being the first one to do a lot of these things on this car in particular. And maybe that has some influence on my decision as well. But that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. And of course, we'll catch you next week for the next one.